Hello, Soldierboy here, and welcome to my review and look back at Assassin's Creed Odyssey after the 100% of the game and the DLCs. Now the game features 94 trophies, including the DLC trophies, and none are missable. You barely went out of our way to collect any of them, with the hardest and most annoying being Xerxes' treasure arc. Well, let's start with the story. The story is part revenge, part putting your family back together, all headed by the cult of Cosmos. And it works fairly well. One issue I had is if you played as Cassandra, the Olympic missions wouldn't make as much sense as if you played as Alexios. But generally the story seemed well paced and fitted together nicely. There were many surprises in the story along the way, and a few times I did go, wow, I wasn't expecting that. When we first started the game, combat seemed very slow and there was a lot of parrying, and as we grew stronger and got better gear, combat became a lot more fun. By the end of the game, combat was second nature, and it was a lot of fun, although never easy. Abilities in Assassin's Creed Odyssey do play a big part, not just as a way of regaining health, as you don't take rations or potions along the way, but also as a way of using abilities to quickly dispatch enemies, overpower being the biggest one. The finishing moves are pretty good, although we've seen in the likes of Valhalla that these can only get better. There's nothing more satisfying than finishing off a big fight with a nice overpower move to take out the last person. Stealth, although it doesn't play a big part in the game, we did try to use it as a technique for taking out camps. The Rust assassination was really useful for this, although it can go badly wrong very quickly. Sometimes it worked really well, other times it didn't. This leads us on to the bounty system. Now the bounty system for me wasn't a big deal. We kind of ignored it and made a promise at the start of our playthrough not to pay off a single bounty, and we completed the whole thing without paying a single one off. It did involve going backwards a few times to take out the person and put the bounty on us, and the system seems a bit odd in the way you get the person who put the bounty on you be miles and miles away from where you were. I can understand it if the person who put the bounty on you was in the camp with you, as that makes sense. When they're 5 or 6 camps away, it doesn't make as much sense. But it didn't really bother us. At the start it was a bit difficult when you've got 3 bounty hunters straight on you. There were times certain things wouldn't work. We'd clear a question mark and get a bounty for doing so. For me that didn't make any sense. The mercenaries themselves that come after you, fairly plain. They all have a different fighting style. Some have pets with them, like this guy and his dog. Generally they weren't that difficult later on. Early on we tend to avoid them as much as possible. But we are end stage, it didn't really matter anymore. The extra bounty hunters you got towards the end game also didn't really make any sense. When you get to the top of the bounty system and you get all the rewards, after that there's no real need to go after them. But not a bad system, just flawed in places. Now, gear for me was an issue when we first started. It was horrible. Every 5 minutes we were changing our gear or checking what we'd picked up to see if it was any better. But as the game went on, we checked our gear a lot less and finally used only legendary gear. One big plus point about the gear system is it forced us to use a range of different weapons that we wouldn't have used normally. Some of these are really good, but some, like the spear, their moveset is just so awkward you didn't want to use one. The overpower moves in different weapons also changed. The heavy blunts you could chain an overpower move and play cricket or baseball as such with the people you're against. All the different sets of armour worked really well, all have different looks, different purposes, different stats. Towards the end, we kind of just kept going with whatever armour we gained legendary wise in the DLCs. We didn't really look at stats anymore. It was more just completing that set. Again, not a bad gear system, and it gave you a chance to use different types of weapons. Now your ship plays a big part in Odyssey, and combat with your ship is really good fun, but fairly easy. The look of the ship, the motion on the sea, and the view around it is fantastic. Cannot fault it in the slightest. The only time combat got difficult on your ship was when you have 4 or 5 ships attacking you all at once. And even then, it can get difficult, but you can run away. Your ship won't heal unless you're out of combat. You can brace it away when they're shooting arrows at you. The one big thing that I really liked was the Flamethrower. The Flamethrower was a difference maker for me, and it worked really well. But it probably wasn't realistic for the time period, as according to history, the Flamethrower wasn't used on ships until 672 BC, and Assassin's Creed is set over 200 years previous. But nevertheless, ship combat was fun. Now the maps in Assassin's Creed were brilliant. They were massive, they had so much going on, so much detail and so much to do. And I really enjoyed them. As we showcase through the different maps throughout the game, including the DLCs, we'll quickly talk about fantasy. Now, fantasy in Odyssey plays a big part. You've got the Minotaur, you've got Medusa. And in some ways I think it should. Greek mythology is full of amazing creatures. Does it really tie into the assassin world? Probably not. But without them it wouldn't really be ancient Greece. Although we later discover the Isu are responsible for the mythical creatures, which kind of ties it in really nicely. We'll also move on to the DLCs. Legacy of the First Blade was entertaining, thought-provoking, and it carried your journey on through the main map. I think it took us around 15 hours for all 3 episodes of Legacy of the First Blade. Now, Fate of Atlantis added 3 new maps, and was spectacular in story, combat and visual wonders. Are the DLCs worth it? Yes, massively. I cannot fault the DLCs at all. I think they add so much more to the game than people realise. All in all, a thoroughly enjoyable game that divides opinion after all this time. Is it an Assassin's Creed game? No, but it follows a story pattern and keeps us intrigued about the Isu and their plans. To really enjoy the game, you have to not think about being an assassin. Instead, see it as a chance to see ancient Greece at its finest. After 174 hours, it's now time for us to say goodbye to ancient Greece and Alexios. Before we finish, a massive thank you to everyone who joined us on this journey for ancient Greece. We finished looking at where it all started, Kefalonia.